Hey everybody, welcome back to finally another episode in Project C.A.R. I know it's been a while and I've been really busy with other stuff, but we finally have time to look at the engine. We continue work on that. So as I said before, I'm building a replica of the Alpina setup that they had in the days. It's not 100% correct, but I think we're close enough. Initially, I'm only going to do the carburetors and the air inlet because the engine has been rebuilt recently. I don't want to take it apart just yet until I overhaul it next time. Then I'm going to change all the internals to match the Alpina. So this time round, we're going to have a look at the choke cable I installed, but also the custom gaskets we had made for the air filters, for the air inlets. And we've changed a few things on the air horns that used to be on here. We're now using them for something else. Then we're also going to have a quick look at some of the connections I bought for the oil lines and for the vacuum line that comes out of here, and the bracket that my dad made for me, which has now finally been powder coated, and we'll go and install again. So I'd say let's get to work. So as I said, first off we're going to look at the mount that my dad made. So we're going to put that back on now that it's finally been powder coated. I'm going to give it a quick wipe to make sure there's no dust or residue on it. Then we'll go and install it in its place. So what we did is we created an extra little mounting point here. So we made a small hole in the engine block, and that sits with an M6 bolt here, and then the bottom part sits onto the main engine support, for which we've already used a standard bolt. So I'm going to install this. Now eventually I want to use a different nut on here, but for the time being I'm just going to pop this one back in. Obviously these will have to be retorqued, but I'm going to replace them with stainless steel before I do that anyway. So for now I'm just going to leave it as is. Right, there we go, that's now nicely in place. And as you can see, we've got a nice amount of clearance on either side here, and similar on that side. So it's now time to put the gaskets in between the carburetors and the inlet manifolds, or the air pieces, elbows, and then we'll go to the next step. So as you can see here, this is one of the custom made gaskets that we did. So what we did first is we created a template with paper, and then my dad designed it on the computer and then had them made. So these are 2mm thick rubber gaskets. So there's one big one on here, on which the airbox itself sits, and then we've got two individual ones that go on here. So let's go and install these next. So these are the other two that we had made. You can see they're slightly different, and that's because one of them has an extra little inlet pipe here. So we'll pop that one on. Again, these are 2mm thick. So that's the first one. Obviously it will seat nicely once the piece has been bolted onto the carburetor. I'll quickly do the other one. There we go. So you also notice, you may have noticed that the studs are a lot longer than previously. So these are the original studs. As you can see, they're a lot shorter than the new ones, and that is so that we can go all the way through and then secure them with a nut at the other side. So next step is to actually fill the inlets themselves. And what we did for that is, you might remember the air horns that sat on here and stuck out. Well, we've trimmed them off so that we can now flip them around and actually seat them in here. They stick out a little bit so that once the gasket is on, it's a nice tight seal, so that there's no false air being drafted in or sucked in anywhere. So they go in first. Now I can reinstall the 90-degree elbow piece. There we go, and that would sit like that. So next step is to just quickly put 4 nuts on these. So then guys, so the top tube, I'm using what is called a non-serrated flanged nylock nut and washer assembly, locking nuts. I'm using nylock because I think they're far enough away from the engine block and shouldn't get too hot for them to melt. And I like the fact that this is one assembly, which is nice engineering. Unfortunately, I can't use them at the bottom because there's not enough space, and the bottom side is just a standard washer. with a nylock nut on that. So I'm now going to tighten these 4 up and then we'll jump across to the next one. So I finally managed to get the bolts the nut and washer assemblies on. It's quite a bit of a pain in the behind, shall we say, because underneath the carburetor doesn't really allow itself to be mounted nicely, or easy, sorry, for the nuts to go on because of the way it's designed. And it was actually, like I said, they're longer than the original, so that's why it's been a bit of a difficult one to get on. But I've got the first 4 on, I've only got 8 left to do. So that's going to be my next job. I'm going to do the other 2, so these ones and the last. Once that's done, we can install the airbox on top. So that took a bit longer than expected. The problem was that the nuts at the bottom didn't fit very well, as in there's very little space to work with. So I ended up not using the flange nuts at the top, but the bottom is just a basic nut and washer assembly. Yeah, I was hoping that would be slightly easier, but unfortunately it wasn't. Anyway, they're on now. In the meantime, what I've done is I've put an M16 thread. Where is it? Here you go. M16 times 1.5 thread on the inside of the valve cover, and I've done the same. That was daft because that was still wet. I've done the same on the airbox inlet, and I'll show you that shortly. So the next step, I've also installed the 90-degree elbow piece. That will be for the brake booster. This is where the vacuum comes from. So that's in. As you can see, it sticks out quite a bit. I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to shorten it or tap it further and then have it go in deep. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to have a look at that. But for now, that should be fine with access once the valve cover, the airbox is on top. So that's going to be the next step. So like I said, I've installed all the gaskets. They're all in. The bracket is in place that supports it. And as you can see here at the bottom, he says, let me just turn the camera a wee bit. As you can see here at the bottom, I've got these rubbers, and that is to stop the vibrations from the engine block to go into the airbox, because all the carburetors are on rubbers as well, so it should hopefully minimize any evolved vibrations. Also, in order to fit this, we had to slightly alter the layout of the fuel hose, so they've now been turned the other direction and are just low enough so they don't touch the control arms or levers. They have been adjusted as well because they were sticking up too high, so they've been shortened and at a lower position, so the airbox lays freely on top of it. So yeah, let's go and see if we can install this bad boy. Right, here we go. See if we can get this nicely aligned. There we go. Wow. Well, that seems to work. Cool. That's all neatly. So I've got about 5 mil of space in between the airbox and the fuel line. The control arms are all nicely clear. Plenty of space for these. Yeah, like I said, I've got, let me just move the camera for you. There's plenty of space yet to take him out again, shorten, or put extra thread in there and then put him fully. There is obviously a bit of cleanup job to do here, but there's sufficient space for these two to get a 90-degree elbow on there to go out. I think they're going to go up front towards my catch can. They may well be that they run towards the back. I'm not entirely sure yet where I'm going to put it, but more on that in the future. So the bowring cable is completely free that I installed. He just runs through. It's a bicycle gear wire, what do they call them? Something like that. Anyway, I use that because it's thinner than a standard bowring cable for a car. that runs around here and then is attached to all 3 carbs to come out the other end, where eventually it will go into the cab or the cabin to then attach the switch at the other end. So the next step for me will be to attach the nuts at the bottom here, so that they're nicely fixed in position. Now unfortunately I was a bit too excited with sanding off or filing off the top end of the thread, because I shortened the bolt, so I had to just adjust it a little bit so that the nuts go on. But that's resulted in me not being able to put a washer on the second one, because there's just not enough thread there for the nylock nut to catch on. The front one, however, is fine, so that can go on that one, and just like I said, a single nut on the other one. To be fair, there's plenty of material between the nut and the rubber, so it shouldn't really be an issue. So we'll just go and tighten these up. Again, I don't have any torque figures for these. I just tighten them until they're nice and tight. They're not coming off. There isn't any force on them, so as long as my rubber can freely move, I'm happy. Nice. So then all that's left is to put nuts on the top. I'm going to do it last, but I think I'm going to use a nicely domed shapes that are same on the valve cover. That will be last though, because I'll probably have to take the cover off one more time in order to facilitate fitting the 2 the catch can exit and entry onto the ports here. So that's why I'm going to leave it loose for now. Next step for me, however, that's going to be some more work at the bottom side of things here. I think I need to somehow come up with a I think I found a cover that goes onto the filter, the original filter entry, that allows for 2 AN10 size joints that then can go to an external filter and cooler. So that's what I'm going to be using. But like I said, I need to have a better look at that. I might consider swapping out our trusty little alternator for something more modern. Because of all the equipment that I'm running, I might need a little bit more juice, but that will be something for the future. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the installation of the Alpina Airbox for now. Like I said, more on that in the future when I come to adjust it and we come to install it. I think the next step though, which is going to be the next episode, is for me to start working on the rear subframe, which has finally come back. Well, finally I say. I finally managed to drop it off to get sandblasted, coated, and then given a nice shiny black finish. Anyway, that's going to be for a different episode, which will be the next one. For now, that's going to be it from me. Hopefully this was an enjoyable episode for you. It's probably a little bit shorter than the other ones, but like I said, there wasn't a huge amount of work left to do. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let me know your comments, feedback underneath the video. And then I'll see you again hopefully at the next one. Thank you very much. Bye bye.